The music began softly, almost politely, as people filled the hall decorated in cream and gold. And the evening that was meant to celebrate love slowly took shape. But beneath the warm lights and arranged smiles, tension moved like a quiet current. Because Emma Carter had just walked into her brother Daniel's engagement party, and even before anyone said a word, she felt the familiar weight settle on her shoulders, that old sense of being slightly out of place in a room where everyone knew exactly who they were supposed to be. Emma paused near the entrance, adjusted her coat, and scanned the room as laughter rolled from table to table. And she saw the familiar faces of relatives she had grown up with. People who had watched her stumble, dream, leave, return, and leave. Again, people who believed they knew her story better than she did. Daniel stood at the center, confident and charming, his hand resting proudly on Olivia's. And Emma felt a genuine warmth for him, because she loved her brother and she was happy for him. Yet that warmth tangled with something heavy as she remembered how often she had been compared to him, how his steady path had been praised while hers had been questioned. She moved forward, greeted a few cousins, offered polite smiles, and chose a seat near the side, hoping to observe rather than participate, because she had learned that observation was safer when judgment could appear without warning. The first toast came early, full of cheer and jokes. And people laughed easily as Daniel's success was praised. But then the jokes shifted just enough to sting, with words about how he had always known what he wanted and how everyone wasn't as lucky or as focused. And even though no name was spoken, Emma felt the room tilt slightly toward her, like a breeze she alone could feel. She took a sip of her drink, steadying herself, reminding herself why she came, reminding herself that she did not need approval to exist in her own life. Conversations swirled around her, fragments of words brushing past like careless hands. Comments about careers, relationships, timing, and expectations. And more than once, someone leaned in with a smile that was meant to be kind but carried quiet judgment, asking if she was still traveling so much, if she had finally settled somewhere, if she had plans to catch up, and each question landed like a reminder that her life did not fit the shape her family preferred. Emma answered simply, without defense, because she was tired of explaining choices that felt right to her but confusing to others. And she reminded herself that not every truth needed an audience. As dinner began, she listened more than she spoke. Watching Olivia's parents glow with pride, watching Daniel beam. And she noticed how easily admiration moved toward people whose lives followed visible milestones. Engagements, houses, promotions. And how invisible the quieter victories became when they did not arrive on schedule. When her uncle raised his glass again, laughing about how Emma was always the dreamer of the family, always chasing something big that had yet to land. A few people chuckled, and even though the tone was light, Emma felt heat rise behind her. Eyes, not from shame, but from a deep fatigue she had carried for years. She remembered being younger, announcing her plans with excitement, only to be met with concern, advice disguised as doubt, praise followed by warnings, and over time she had learned to keep her hopes close to her chest, protected from careless words. Daniel eventually found her near the edge of the room and hugged her warmly, joking about how she always arrived like a mystery. And when he teased her about whether she had brought someone special or was still living out of a suitcase, Emma laughed softly because she knew he did not mean harm. But the joke still landed in that sensitive place where old comparisons lived. She excused herself soon after and stepped outside into the cool evening air, the noise of the party fading behind her as she finally allowed herself to breathe deeply, letting the quiet settle her thoughts. She stood there under soft lights, strung along the patio, reflecting on how strange it was to feel proud of her life and unseen at the same time. How success could exist without applause, how love could grow without witnesses. Her phone vibrated in her hand, and when she saw the message, something inside her shifted gently, not with anger or triumph, but with calm certainty. Because the message was simple and steady, saying that someone important was close, that the distance she had endured was about to close, and Emma smiled. Not because she wanted to prove anything, but because she felt supported in a way that did not require explanation. She thought about how her journey had been shaped by choices that were lonely at times, choices that demanded patience, resilience, and trust in herself when others questioned her direction. And she realized that tonight, more than any other, she did not need to defend where she was in life. She returned inside with a composed expression, listening as conversations continued. Noticing how easily people spoke about her when they assumed she could not hear, and she felt a quiet strength grow in her chest, not sharp, not loud, just solid, like something that had finally settled into place. The laughter, the music, the clinking glasses all blended into a single rhythm. And Emma moved through it with calm purpose, knowing that what she carried within her mattered more than what others could see, knowing that patience had shaped her into someone unrecognizable to those who measured worth by appearances alone. As the party continued, subtle glances followed her, some curious, some dismissive, but none of them reached her the way they once had, because she was no longer waiting for permission to belong. And as the doors at the far end of the hall opened, again later that evening, Emma felt a quiet anticipation stir. Not dramatic, not rushed, but certain. Because the story they thought they knew was only beginning, and the version of her they had mocked was already behind her. The doors at the far end of the hall opened with little noise, but the shift in the room was immediate, like air changing before a storm. And Emma felt it even before she turned her head, because instinct told her this moment mattered. And when she looked up, she saw him stepping inside with calm purpose. Not rushed, not uncertain. A man who moved as if he belonged wherever he stood. Noah Bennett scanned the room once, politely, then his eyes found Emma. And something unspoken passed between them, relief, warmth, reassurance, and Emma felt her shoulders relax in a way they had not all evening. He walked toward her through the crowded space, past curious glances and half-formed questions. And when he reached her, he smiled in that familiar way that always grounded her. As if the noise around them faded the moment they stood together. He took her hand gently, not to make a show, but to be present, and Emma felt the weight of the night lift slightly. Replaced by steady confidence she did not need to perform. Whispers began almost instantly, quiet at first, then bolder as heads turned and conversations paused because families always noticed what disrupted the story they thought they controlled. Noah greeted her family members politely when they approached, shaking hands, making small talk, offering warmth without trying too hard. And Emma watched how easily he navigated the room, how respect seemed to follow him naturally, not because of wealth or status, but because he listened, spoke clearly, and never rushed his words. Daniel noticed quickly and raised an eyebrow with playful curiosity, pulling Emma aside to ask who her guest was, and Emma answered simply, saying Noah was someone important to her. And that answer alone felt like a quiet victory because it was honest without explanation. Dinner resumed with a different energy, and Emma felt it in the way people sat straighter, spoke softer, and included her more deliberately in conversations they had once assumed she did not belong in asking about. Her work now with genuine interest instead of polite doubt. Noah remained close, but never overshadowed her, letting Emma speak for herself, supporting rather than leading. And that balance did not go unnoticed. During a pause between courses, Emma's mother studied her with new eyes, not critical, but thoughtful, as if seeing her daughter not as a question to solve, but as a person with depth she had not fully understood. When speeches began again, Daniel stood, glass raised, thanking friends and family, praising Olivia, and sharing stories of childhood memories that made the room laugh. And then, unexpectedly, he spoke about Emma, about how she had always been. Fearless, how she left home early, chased work others warned her against, and refused to follow a map that had been drawn for her. And although his tone was light, Emma sensed sincerity beneath it, a recognition that felt overdue. As Daniel spoke, Emma felt eyes on her again, But this time, the weight felt different. Less judgment, more curiosity. As if people were realizing there were chapters missing from the version of her they had been telling themselves. When Emma stood to respond, she did not plan a speech, but the words came naturally, honest and calm. Thanking Daniel and Olivia, speaking about how love found people in different seasons. How success did not always arrive loudly, and how patience could be its own kind of strength. And the room listened, truly listened. Because her voice carried certainty, not defensiveness. Noah stepped forward after her, introducing himself properly this time. Not with pride, but with clarity, explaining his work briefly, mentioning Emma's role without embellishment, crediting her vision and leadership. And in that moment, a quiet ripple passed through the crowd because titles changed how people listened, whether they admitted it or not. Emma watched as understanding settled on familiar faces, watched smiles adjust, watched respect bloom where doubt had once lived, and she felt no rush of triumph, only a grounded sense of arrival, as if she had finally stepped fully into her own space. Questions followed, gentle but eager, about projects, travel, plans. And Emma answered comfortably now, because she was no longer shrinking herself to fit the room. Someone asked how long she and Noah had known each other, and Emma paused, meeting his eyes before answering, saying long enough to trust where things were going. And that simple sentence carried depth that did not need detail. The music softened again as dessert was served. Laughter returning with a different tone, less sharp, more respectful. And Emma noticed how often people now sought her opinion, how often her presence was acknowledged rather than dismissed. Still, beneath the surface, tension lingered, because not everyone adjusted easily. And Emma felt it in sideways glances, in conversations that stopped when she passed. Reminders that change unsettled people who preferred familiar stories. She did not mind anymore because she knew what she carried was real and steady. Later, as the party drifted toward its final hours, Emma and Noah stepped aside near the windows, the city lights glowing beyond the glass. And she admitted quietly that the night had been harder than she expected. That old wounds had a way of opening when family gathered. Noah listened without interruption, his presence offering comfort without trying to fix anything. And he reminded her that survival itself was not small, that endurance shaped people in ways applause never could. Emma watched her family from a distance, seeing them now as flawed but human, shaped by expectations they themselves had inherited. And she realized that forgiveness did not mean forgetting, but releasing the need to be understood by everyone. As the evening slowed, conversations turned softer. Apologies emerged indirectly, asked as compliments, and Emma accepted them with grace, not because she owed it, but because she was ready to move forward without carrying resentment. Yet even with the calm settling over her, Emma sensed that something else lingered, something unresolved. Because her story was not finished being told, not to them, and not even to herself. And as she stepped outside again with Noah beside her, the cool night air wrapping around them, she knew that whatever came next would require courage of a different kind. Not the courage to prove herself, but the courage to choose her own future openly. The lights behind them dimmed as the party wound down, and Emma felt a quiet certainty take hold. Because the moment that had begun with mockery was transforming into something unexpected. Something that would challenge not only how her family saw her, but how she allowed herself to step into what she truly wanted. And as Noah turned to her with a look that suggested an important question was waiting just beyond the night, Emma understood that the real turning point had not yet arrived. It was only gathering its strength. The party slowly loosened its grip on the night as people began to leave in small groups. Coats pulled on, hugs exchanged, laughter fading into softer tones. And Emma stood near the exit, watching it all with a calm she had not expected to feel. Because the weight she carried earlier had finally lifted, replaced by clarity that felt earned rather than sudden. Noah stood beside her, steady and quiet, not filling the space with words, just present. And Emma realized how rare that kind of support was, the kind that did not demand gratitude or explanation. As relatives passed by, some stopped to speak, longer than they had before, offering careful compliments, asking thoughtful questions, and even when apologies came wrapped in indirect language, Emma accepted them with grace, because she understood that people often struggled to admit when they were wrong, especially to someone they once underestimated. Her mother approached near the end, eyes softer than Emma remembered them being in years, and spoke about how proud she was, how she wished she had asked more questions instead of giving advice. And Emma listened without bitterness, knowing that healing did not require perfect words, only honest effort. Daniel hugged her tightly before leaving, telling her he admired her courage and admitting he had not always shown it. And Emma felt a chapter quietly close, not with drama, but with understanding that had taken years to arrive. When the hall finally emptied, the lights dimmed, and the staff began clearing tables, Emma and Noah stepped outside together, the night air cool and calm, the city resting under a low hum of distant traffic and glowing windows. They walked slowly, neither in a hurry, because the rush to prove anything had disappeared, replaced by something deeper, something solid. Emma spoke openly then, telling Noah how long it had taken her to trust her own path, how loneliness had shaped her, how moments like tonight once scared her because they forced her to face who she had been and who she had become. Noah listened, then shared his own quiet fears, his doubts hidden behind success, the pressure to always appear certain, and Emma saw that confidence did not mean the absence of struggle, only the willingness to keep moving forward despite it. They paused beneath a streetlight, the soft glow falling between them. And Noah told her that watching her stand calmly through the evening had confirmed what he already knew, that she was strong without being hard, determined without needing applause. And Emma felt emotion rise, not overwhelming, but deep and warm. He said there was something he wanted to ask, something he had thought about for months, but he wanted to do it when the noise faded, when it was just the two of them. And Emma understood that whatever he meant carried weight, not because of expectation, but because of trust. She told him she was ready for what came next, not because everything was perfect, but because she finally felt aligned with herself, and that was something no one could take away. As they continued walking, Emma reflected on how far she had come, how the woman who once doubted herself would not recognize the calm confidence she felt now. And she realized that the mockery she endured earlier no longer defined her, because it had lost its power the moment she stopped seeking approval. The night stretched ahead, quiet and full of possibility. And Emma felt gratitude not for the change in how others saw her, but for the change in how she saw herself. Understanding that validation was temporary, but self-belief lasted. Noah reached for her hand again, not to steady her this time, but simply because it felt right, and Emma let herself enjoy the moment without analyzing it, without wondering how it looked from the outside. Behind them, the engagement party became a memory not of pain or embarrassment, but of transformation. A moment where old labels fell away and truth stood quietly in their place. Emma knew challenges would still come, misunderstandings would still happen, and not everyone would fully understand her journey, but she no longer needed them to, because she had learned that belonging did not come from fitting into expectations. It came from honoring one's own direction. As the city lights reflected in her eyes, Emma felt peaceful, aware that the future did not need grand announcements or dramatic turns to be meaningful. It only needed honesty, courage, and the willingness to choose herself, and with Noah beside her, she stepped forward into what came next, not as the woman her family once mocked, but as the woman she had always been becoming. Confident, grounded, and finally free.